Nobody tells you this, infinite banking isn't actually for people in debt. The real wealth builders, the Rockefellers, the Kennedys, and the families that have had money for over 200 years, they use it for something completely different. You've probably done everything right. No debt, maxed out your 401k, got your emergency fund sitting there. But here's the thing, your savings account is sitting there earning either 1% or maybe 4.5% if you caught the rate before it dropped. And that's not guaranteed. It changes month to month. Meanwhile, inflation is eating away at your purchasing power. The gap between what you're doing and what the ultra wealthy do with their money is massive. And it's not about debt elimination. In the next 15 minutes, you're going to understand why infinite banking is actually designed for people exactly like you. You followed the playbook perfectly. Eliminate debt, max your retirement accounts, invest in index funds, but there's a ceiling that no one talks about. Once you max your 401k at $23,500, your HSA, your backdoor Roth, you hit a wall. The IRS says that's it. No more tax advantage space. So if you're earning $150,000 to $400,000 a year, you've got $50,000 to $150,000 extra every year that the government won't let you shelter from taxes. That money either goes into a taxable brokerage where you pay capital gains tax annually, or it just sits in savings earning basically nothing real. Now let's talk about why savings accounts seem like the smart move. You put in $200,000 into a high yield savings account and it sounds great. You're earning 4.5 if you jumped on one before the rates dropped, but here's the catch. Those rates aren't guaranteed. They change constantly. Last year, it might have been 4.5. This month, it might be 4.1%, and the next quarter, it could be 3.8. You never know what you're actually getting. Let's do the math anyway on that 4.5% scenario. $200,000 earning 4.5% gives you $9,000 a year in interest. Then you pay taxes. If you're in a high income bracket, you're probably paying around 24% federal tax on that interest. So you lose roughly $2,100. You're left with $6,800 in actual net income. But here's the problem. Inflation is running 2.5 to 3.5%. On $200,000, that's $5,000 to $7,000 of your purchasing power just vanishing. Your supposedly safe money is actually losing ground. This trap keeps high incomers stuck. You want liquidity, you want growth, but traditional banking forces you to either choose one or the other. You can't have both, or so you thought. The Rockefellers figured something out 200 years ago that most people never learned. They stopped using banks the regular way people do. They created their own banking system using whole life insurance. Now, before you click away thinking this is about insurance, hear me out. This isn't about death benefit. It's about the cash value that grows inside the policy. The Rockefellers, the Kennedys, and the DuPonts, they all used this structure. Not to pay off debt, they used it to build parallel financial infrastructure. A place where money grows, stays liquid, and never gets taxed on growth. This is the permission that you need. Infinite banking for debt-free people isn't about desperation, it's about optimization. It's about doing what old money families have done for generations. The question you should ask isn't, should I use this to pay off debt? The question is, where do I put my next $50,000 to $100,000 that isn't in the stock market? It doesn't lock me out until 59.5, and it doesn't get hammered by taxes every year. The answer is the same tool the wealthy have used for 2 centuries. Okay, so here's where this actually works for your life. Let me show you 4 different scenarios, and one of them is probably you. You've got $100,000 sitting in a high yield savings account. You feel good about it, it's your cushion, but that money earning 4.5%, if that rate even sticks, gives you $4,500 a year. After taxes, you're looking at about $3,000 in your pocket. Inflation eats maybe $3,000 to $3,500. You're basically breaking even or going backwards in real terms. Now imagine instead putting that $50,000 annually into a properly structured whole life. Year 1, you put in about $50,000 and your cash value grows to roughly about $40,000 year 1. But here's what happens next. Year 5, you put in $250,000 total, but your cash value value has grown to around 280,000 to 300,000. The growth is compounding and guaranteed. There's no down years. Year 10, you've paid $500,000 in premiums, but your cash value is 600,000 to 650,000. That's not beating the stock market, it's beating your savings account after taxes. And there's no volatility. The next application is the volatility buffer for investors. So let's say you've got $800,000 in the stock market. You did well, but you remember 2022 when the stock market dropped 18%. You remember 2008 when it dropped 37%. What keeps you up at night is a sequence of returns risk. If you needed money during a crash, you'd be forced to sell low. And that's the real killer. A $50,000 annual premium whole life policy with $300,000 in cash value becomes your circuit breaker. When the markets crash, you don't touch your investments. You borrow against your policy at a fixed rate, currently around 5% to 6%. Your investments stay intact and recover while you access capital at a predictable cost. And here's the mechanic most people miss. Policy loans don't stop growth. Your cash value keeps compounding even while you're borrowing from it. You're not liquidating anything. You're just accessing capital when you need it most. The next application would be tax arbitrage for high earners. You're in a 37% federal tax bracket, and state taxes, you're at 42% combined. You earned $300,000 this year and keep roughly $174,000 after taxes. You can put maybe $50,000 into a whole life policy with those after-tax dollars. That $50,000 grows tax deferred inside of the policy. When you borrow against it, the loan is completely free. When you die, the death benefit transfers income tax free to your heir. Compare that to a taxable brokerage where you earn 8% returns. You can pay 15 to 20% capital gains tax annually on those gains, and your heirs eventually get a stepped up basis. The whole life path, there's zero taxes on growth, zero taxes on access, and zero taxes on transfer. The difference compounds dramatically over time. In the final application, let's say you're a real estate investor with $200,000 sitting in a checking earning nothing. You're waiting for the right deal. Instead, that $200,000 goes into whole life cash value where it earns at a guaranteed rate plus dividends while you wait. When the deal comes, you access the policy via policy loan in 24 to 48 hours. Your capital wasn't idle, it was working. These applications show why infinite banking for debt-free people is completely different from using it to pay off debt. You're not desperate, you're just optimizing. At this point, most people hit a wall. They've seen whole life dismissed as a scam, they've heard the objections, and let me address the three that stop this conversation dead before it even starts. The criticism usually comes from Dave Ramsey or Susie Orman video from like 2008. The argument goes, you pay for this product, the returns are low, and you'd be better off buying term and just investing the difference. Here's what's actually true. Yes, whole life returns are lower than stock market returns in bull runs, but that's not the right comparison. You're not comparing whole life to the stock market. You're comparing it to a savings account, money market funds, or taxable brokerage accounts. A high yield savings account earning 4.5% after taxes nets you roughly 3.5%. A high yield savings account earning 4.5% after taxes nets you roughly 3.2% in your pocket. Whole life earning 4 to 5% guaranteed plus 1 to 2 in dividends, all tax deferred, nets you 5 to 7% net. And unlike the stock market, it never has a down year. The Rockefellers didn't use whole life for 200 years because it was a scam. They used it because it worked. The next objection is that you will lose liquidity. This objection usually comes from someone who bought a standard whole life policy designed for death benefit and not cash value. A typical policy might have $50,000 in death benefit, but only $8,000 in cash value after 10 years. That's worthless for IBC. A properly designed IBC flips the ratio completely. It's sometimes called a minimum death benefit policy. You put in $50,000 annually, but the policy is designed the absolute minimum death benefit required to stay classified as insurance. Everything else goes to cash value growth. After 10 years, you're looking at a $300,000 or more in accessible cash value. You access it via policy loans at a fixed rate, currently about 4 to 5%. There's no forced repayment schedule, no credit check, and here's the key. Your cash value keeps growing as if the loan didn't exist. It's completely different from a standard policy. If you bought a whole life before and hated it, that's because it wasn't designed for IBC. You got the wrong tool for the job. The final objection is just that the returns are too low. Whole life earning between 4 to 6% seems weak compared to historical stock market runs of 10%. But this ignores three critical factors: taxes, volatility, and what you're actually earning on idle cash right now. On a taxable brokerage account earning 8%, you would pay 15 to 20% annually in capital gains tax, leaving you with about 6.4 to 6.8% net. On whole life earning 5% guaranteed plus dividends with zero taxes, you're keeping the full 5 to 7% net, and that gap closes dramatically when you account for taxes. The second is volatility. In 2022, the stock market returned negative 18%. Whole life return positive 5%. Which would you rather have? The third is just the opportunity cost. If you have $200,000 sitting in cash earning 1%, putting it into a whole life at 5% is earning you $10,000 a year. That's not low, but that's better than nothing. Better than eroding purchasing power you get from savings accounts. The returns aren't meant to beat the stock market. They're meant to beat savings accounts while eliminating volatility and maximizing tax efficiency. Now that you have the framework, infinite banking for debt-free earners is about creating a private banking infrastructure for wealth optimization. It's a savings upgrade, a volatility buffer, a tax shelter, and an investment staging ground all in one structure. The Rockefellers understood this 200 years ago. You understand it now. And finally, if you want to see what a properly structured whole life policy looks for your specific scenario, click the link below and book on my calendar, and we can take a look at it.